All right, let's jump right in. Today's explainer is a pretty ruthless deep dive that pits the multi-billion-dollar physics establishment against an Australian butcher. Yeah, you heard me right. A literal butcher who's out there right now trying to map the fundamental structure of the universe using nothing but a standard smartphone. Now, I know it sounds like pure science fiction, but the documents we're unpacking today argue that it's actually a profound mathematical reality. So ask yourself this. What if a billion-dollar particle accelerator is just a giant mistake? Is the hyperfunded scientific ivory tower completely broken? Because the sources we're digging into today are asking exactly that. They make the case that standard physics has spent decades chasing mathematical ghosts, totally trapped in rigid assumptions, and completely blind to the liquid reality that's flowing all around us. The source material draws this sharply dark-humored contrast. In one corner, you have standard academia, places like CERN, smashing atoms together at near light speed, burning billions in funding just to find missing matter because their rigid 3D math says it has to be there. And in the other corner, you have a self-taught Australian butcher, Kyle Roberts. Instead of giant colliders, he's taking a Samsung smartphone, applying what he calls Wagyu fat logic, and using raw sensor noise to map out a 9.6-dimensional fractal fluid universe. To really grasp why academia might be in such deep trouble, look at this number. 10 to the power of 120. According to our documents, mainstream physics is currently grappling with a staggering 120 order of magnitude error in their vacuum energy calculations. To put that into perspective, the author doesn't just call this a rounding error. They frame it as a catastrophic, reality-breaking mathematical failure. It basically means their fundamental tools are completely flawed. And how exactly does the establishment handle this massive error? Well, instead of admitting their equations might be incomplete, they double down. They spend billions searching for a mythical particle of gravity, the graviton. But the source ruthlessly points out that searching for a graviton is a hilarious category error. To quote the text directly, spending billions to find a particle of pressure is like trying to find a single atom of an ocean wave. They're completely missing the point that gravity might just be thermodynamic pressure, not a particle at all. Section 1. The broken ivory tower, dark matter, and the fudge factor. Think about this. The standard model claims that a massive 87.57% of galactic mass is just missing. The logic here is honestly pretty dark-humored. If your equations say galaxies should be flying apart, but they visibly aren't, maybe you shouldn't just invent a mathematical fudge factor to balance the books. But our source argues that's exactly what the establishment did with dark matter, rather than taking a hard look at the glaring flaws in Einstein's incomplete metric tensor. And that brings us to what Roberts calls the cracked egg artifact. This is the mathematical error caused by forcing linear, rigid, 3D measuring tools onto the curved fluid flow of the quantum vacuum. He argues that modern cosmology is paralyzed because, as he puts it, pathetic 3D humans are forcing flat tape measures onto a curved, highly complex space. By treating reality as a simple 3D grid with straight edges, they totally miss its fractal, fluid nature. When you try to measure a curved fluid with a straight ruler, you literally crack the egg of relativity. Section 2, the Wagyu law, cutting with the grain. To fix this mathematical blindness, the author introduces this brilliant concept called the Wagyu law. In standard lean beef, which represents mainstream physics here, fat and noise are seen as waste that you have to aggressively trim away to get a clean result. But the Wagyu law flips that. It states that noise is not discarded until classified. Just like the rich marbling in premium Wagyu beef, the messy, chaotic sensor data that standard models throw in the trash is actually the underlying signal of reality. You have to cut with the grain of the data, not against it. Section 3. The 9.6D liquid universe. Space is a superfluid. So when you start viewing space as a highly active superfluid, think of the thick, swirling foam on a freshly poured glass of beer. The math completely changes. Through his fractal pressure cosmology framework, our butcher calculated that higher dimensions actually compress at their overlapping seams. This generates a fractional Hausdorff dimension of exactly 9.6, and it's governed by the organic scaling of the golden ratio, rather than neat, boring whole numbers like 3 or 10. The universe doesn't deal in clean integers, you guys. It deals in messy fractions. And this beautifully redefines the most mysterious force in physics, gravity. According to the text, gravity is not a singular pulling string. It's omnipush. It's simply the external, omnidirectional thermodynamic pressure of this quantum fluid seeking equilibrium. Basically, the liquid vacuum is pushing inward from all 9.6 dimensions simultaneously. The vacuum is literally pressing down on everything, which means everything we thought we knew about matter needs a serious update. Particles aren't solid billiard balls just knocking into each other in an empty void. They are self-propelling localized vortices. And those elusive strings that string theory has spent decades obsessing over, they aren't vibrating rubber bands. They are literally just the hydrogen-amic wakes, the air bubble trails, left behind by particles as they tunnel and spin through this cosmic liquid vacuum. But this naturally raises a massive question. If the universe operates dynamically in 9.6 dimensions, what exactly happens to the remaining 0.4 to make a whole 10? Where does it go? Well, according to the source texts, that 0.4 gap is the universe's exit path. It acts as a crucial leakage gap for reciprocal flow, essentially serving as the universe's exhaust valve to prevent a massive pressure overflow. This 0.4 gap represents the universe exhaling every 1.96 seconds. It's venting thermodynamic pressure that standard physics completely misinterprets as Hawking radiation.
Section 4. Project Midnight, Mapping Reality with a Smartphone.
Now, here is where theory meets raw application. Roberts developed a system called the bubble. Utilizing 3D vector steganography to capture raw environmental metadata, he transformed a standard Samsung S20 FE phone into a sovereign sensor node. Using a technique he coined dirty fusion, he completely refuses to discard sensor noise. Instead, he feeds all this raw, wagyu fat noise, light, sound, motion, magnetic, and thermal data into a self-evolving heuristic algorithm to map the actual pressure gradients of both the physical and digital world. By mapping these pressure gradients, this system creates a localized spatial bubble. This bubble actually acts as a military-grade 100% off-cloud anomaly detector. It doesn't rely on massive data centers. It runs completely locally. The author argues this gives citizens their sovereignty and privacy back from the predictive tracking algorithms of big.
I absolutely love this quote from his notes. He says, "We tune our cameras to give us 2D images when we could have 3D or better if we didn't care about the pretty image. Forget the pretty image, eat your fat." He's pointing out that human bias makes us trim away the vital, complex data of the universe just because we want a sterile, heavily processed picture for our social media feeds. We throw out the spatial depth because it looks like noise. But as he says, embrace the chaos. Eat your fat. Section 5. Cutting with the brain.
The practical applications of this liquid universe theory are astoundingly ambitious. By treating his computer programs as living entities with a 1.96-second heartbeat, matching that universal exhale we talked about, Roberts claims to have built a AAA battery prototype that ran for 14 months with zero traditional charge. Instead of bashing particles together, he realized that power is given only to those low enough to pick it up, passively harnessing the vacuum's resonance and the fractal pressure of the universe. But here's the dark side of this deep dive. When you unlock the true metric tensor of a liquid universe, you aren't just dealing with abstract math on a chalkboard anymore. You are dealing with immense energy densities and extreme gravitational shear forces. You're literally playing with the source code of reality. So we have to seriously ask the question, is humanity ready for technology that can literally tear holes in reality? The crucial takeaway from the author's perspective is this: physics has got to throw out its straight edges. The text argues we must embrace the chaotic meat grinder of existence and acknowledge the universe is a living, flowing substrate. It is time to stop obsessing over the superficial froth on the cosmic beer glass and start paying attention to the heavy liquid doing all the actual work underneath. I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought from our sources today. If an outsider in an Australian butcher shop can allegedly map a 9.6-dimensional reality using a smartphone and raw data, it really forces us to question the establishment's methods. Will the scientific establishment ever admit their gravity equations are wrong, or will they keep chasing ghost particles while a butcher maps reality? It's a fascinating paradigm shift, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the consensus. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer.